How would you describe a person who intentionally, yes, intentionally, took the life of a 6-month-old baby? Was it a man or a woman, young or old, sane or completely out of their mind? The night of July 17, 2018, in the small town of Natchitoches, Louisiana, took a horrifying turn. Around 10:20 p.m., a driver passing along Breda Avenue noticed something flickering near the railroad tracks. Flames. Concerned, he immediately dialed 911. Firefighters arrived within minutes. The fire itself was small, burning on the pavement near the tracks, nothing too alarming at first glance. But Lieutenant Swisher, the first to step closer, quickly realized this wasn't just any fire. Lying face down, barely moving, was a tiny baby. Flames licked at the child's body, the air thick with the stench of gasoline. It wasn't a doll, it was real. Before we continue, I want to thank you all for being here and supporting this channel. Your engagement helps shed light on these important cases, keeping awareness alive. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and joining our growing community. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I always love hearing from you. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Hannah Barker was, by all accounts, a typical small-town girl. She had done well in high school, excelled in softball, and once dreamed of a future in sports medicine. But somewhere along the way, that dream got lost. Addiction crept into her life, slowly pulling her down. In early 2017, her drug use landed her in court. It wasn't a serious charge, nothing violent, so she was placed in a specialized rehabilitation program, an alternative to jail that offered treatment and support instead of punishment. That's where she met Billy Ellerbe Jr. Relationships between program participants were strictly forbidden, but rules didn't seem to mean much to Hannah and Billy. The judge called her out on it, but she insisted they were just friends, claiming it was nothing more than a few innocent hugs and kisses. That explanation quickly fell apart when routine medical exams revealed she was pregnant. The judge wasn't amused. Seeing it as a mockery of the court's authority, he removed Hannah from the program and sent her to a mandatory 90-day rehab. Soon after, she and Billy split up. Despite everything, Hannah decided to keep the baby and raise him on her own. Billy, already a father to 3 daughters, agreed to share custody. Surprisingly, pregnancy seemed to change Hannah for the better. She followed all the rules of her program, took long walks, ate well, and even started studying again. She had big plans. Northwestern State University's sports medicine program was in her sights for the next school year. It looked like she was turning things around. But appearances can be deceiving. On December 20th, 2017, Levi Ellerbe was born into a loving family. From the very beginning, he was surrounded by warmth, not just from his parents, but also from grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, and older sisters who adored him. His father, thrilled to have a son, was already imagining the adventures they would share as Levi grew up. Levi was a bright and curious baby, constantly engaged with the world around him. Louisiana's mild climate and the close-knit community of Mayberry Mobile Park meant he spent much of his time outside. His mother and grandmothers loved taking him on stroller walks, pointing out birds, trees, and even the occasional bug. He was an early sitter, always reaching for whatever he could get his tiny hands on, including Rex, the family dog's ears. He had an infectious laugh, loved music, and was mesmerized by the bright colors of his favorite TV show, PJ Masks. Though he didn't yet understand the storylines, the cheerful sounds always held his attention. He also loved watching his Uncle Jay play video games, fascinated by the movement on the screen. By the summer of 2018, Levi spent most of his days outdoors, happily crawling on a blanket under the shade of a big tree. But once he discovered the walker, there was no stopping him. He was determined to explore everything around him. At just 6 months old, his world was already filled with love, laughter, and excitement. Meanwhile, his mother, Hannah, returned to work at IHOP. She was friendly with her neighbor, Natasha Jones, who also worked there. On their shared days off, they sometimes took their children on picnics. More recently, though, Hannah had been working different shifts, often alongside another co-worker, Felicia Smith. On the night of July 17, 2018, at around 9:10 p.m., the Natchitoches Police Department received a 911 call from Hannah. She was frantic, reporting that her home had been broken into and that her 6-month-old son, Levi, had been taken. When officers arrived at her trailer in Mayberry Mobile Park, Hannah told them that 2 men had banged on her door before breaking in. She said they sprayed her in the face with a chemical substance, and she ran outside to escape. When she returned, they were gone, and so was Levi. Natchitoches police immediately launched a search, calling in assistance from nearby cities. But Hannah was unable to provide details about the suspects or their appearance, making the search even more challenging. That evening, Levi's grandmother, Kathy, was at home when she received a call from Hannah. But before Kathy could understand what was happening, the call disconnected. She tried calling back several times, but Hannah didn't pick up. When Hannah finally called again, her words were brief. She told Kathy that Levi had been kidnapped, but gave no further details. Panicked, Kathy rushed to Hannah's home. When she arrived, Hannah was sitting in the back of an ambulance, visibly distressed. She kept repeating that they were going to kill Levi, that he was going to die. At 10:20 p.m., just a few blocks away from Hannah's home, about 3 miles from Mayberry Mobile Park, a passerby noticed a fire near the railroad tracks on Breda Avenue and called 911. Firefighters arrived quickly, expecting to put out a small blaze. Instead, they discovered something horrifying. News of the tragedy spread quickly. In a town like Natchitoches, where everyone knew each other, life seemed to come to a halt. The tragedy surrounding Levi Ellerbe's death unfolded like a nightmare no one could have predicted. In the days following his passing, whispers of the event spread, but hope quickly faded into sorrow. Levi was far too young to endure such suffering. His tiny body couldn't withstand the cruelty that had been forced upon him. The news that Levi had died on July 18, 2018, shocked the community. With over 90% of his body burned, the public was left questioning how anyone could inflict such harm on a defenseless infant. What could have driven someone to commit such a horrific act? As the investigation unfolded, the details grew more troubling. A memorial was set up where Levi was found, but the investigation took a strange turn. Investigators began to suspect that the scene at Hannah's trailer didn't add up. The window had been broken, but it seemed deliberate, and the unusual positioning of a bar in the middle of the window raised questions. There were inconsistencies in Hannah's account of what had happened too. She told police she had been sprayed with pepper spray, but no signs of it were found on her, nor could investigators locate any trace of the spray. Hannah's story changed multiple times during her questioning, further deepening suspicions. Each time the police revealed new information, she seemed to adapt her narrative to fit it. The experienced investigators knew she was hiding something, but they also suspected that another person was involved in the crime. At one point, Hannah tried to imply that Louis's father, Billy, might be responsible. But that theory quickly fell apart when police verified his alibi. Then, there was the discovery of blood and fingerprints on the back window of the trailer. Throughout the investigation, Hannah's behavior raised more red flags. She didn't show the expected grief or emotion at the crime scene, nor did she seem particularly distressed at the hospital. Her detached demeanor struck many, including Billy's mother, who noted how flat Hannah seemed after losing her son. The community began to turn against her, questioning her lack of visible mourning. Yet some, like Kathy, Billy's mother, still tried to offer her the benefit of the doubt. But even she had her doubts about Hannah's involvement. On July 20, 2018, Levi was laid to rest in a quiet ceremony at Southern Funeral Home. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered to say goodbye to the innocent child whose life had been cut tragically short. But as they mourned, the investigation took an unexpected twist. On July 21st, news broke that a suspect had been arrested in connection with Levi's death. To everyone's surprise, the person in custody was not someone from Levi's immediate family, but a co-worker of Hannah's, Felicia Smith, Felicia and 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐻 had been in a romantic relationship, and their breakup had occurred just days before the tragedy. Investigators soon learned that, at one point, 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐻 had asked Felicia if she would do anything for her, even go as far as harming Levi. Felicia initially refused, but after their breakup, emotions seemed to drive her to act on that suggestion. On July 17th, Felicia arrived at 𝐸𝐻𝐻's trailer with a gun, intending to shoot Levi. But when the gun jammed, 𝐸𝐻𝐻 allegedly suggested that Felicia burn the baby to destroy the evidence. It was a horrific idea, but for reasons known only to Felicia, she followed through. Levi was taken from the mobile home park, and the devastating events unfolded. Felicia walked a considerable distance with little Levi, crossing the railroad tracks and eventually ending up on Breda Avenue. She laid the child down in a ditch between the tracks and a thicket before dousing his body with gasoline, likely taken from 𝐸𝐻𝐻's trailer, and setting him on fire. Felicia's testimony ultimately led to the prosecution of 𝐸𝐻𝐻 as well. On July 25th, 4 days after Felicia's arrest, 𝐸𝐻𝐻 Barker was taken into custody. She was charged as an accomplice to first-degree murder and conspiracy to murder a child under the age of 12. The charges against her were later upgraded from being an accomplice to first-degree murder. 𝐸𝐻𝐻 told the police that she had used Felicia for money and attention, insisting that Felicia had been far more invested in their relationship than she had been. At a court hearing in September, 𝐸𝐻𝐻's attorney argued that Felicia was the only one with a motive. She was angry after their breakup and had fabricated the story to improve her legal situation. There was no direct physical evidence linking 𝐸𝐻𝐻 to Levi's murder, and her attorney contended that Felicia's accusations were self-serving. But the prosecution worked hard to piece together circumstantial evidence to build their case. They uncovered 𝐸𝐻𝐻's history of drug convictions, a failed probation, and testimonies from people who described her as a compulsive liar. Some even claimed they wouldn't have been surprised if she was involved in the child's death. Most notably, investigators pointed to the inconsistencies in 𝐸𝐻𝐻's statements and the staged nature of the crime scene. At the hearing, 𝐸𝐻𝐻 didn't look at Levi's biological father, Billy Ellerbe Jr., who was seated across the room with family members. When the judge ruled that she would remain in jail, a family member from the Ellerbe side whispered, "Thank you, Jesus." The community gathered for a prayer vigil and balloon release, in memory of little Levi on the riverfront in downtown Natchitoches. Natasha Jones, a co-worker of both 𝐸𝐻𝐻 and Felicia, was there. "This is the most devastating thing this town has ever seen," she said. "I've held this baby before, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing." In July 2021, Felicia Smith, now 28, entered into a plea deal to avoid a capital murder trial that could have resulted in the death penalty. Instead, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and cruelty to a juvenile. She was sentenced to 80 years in prison and agreed to testify against 𝐸𝐻𝐻. In 2022, 𝐸𝐻𝐻, then 26, pleaded guilty to manslaughter of a child under 10 years old, receiving a 10-year sentence, as well as conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, for which she was sentenced to 30 years. The sentences will run concurrently, totaling 30 years in prison. She entered the plea under the Alford Doctrine, meaning she maintained her innocence but accepted the deal in her own best interest. The prosecution, though aware that 𝐸𝐻𝐻 could have avoided conviction if the case had gone to trial, decided to accept the plea agreement. This tragic case, which led to the heartbreaking loss of baby Levi, came to a close with these convictions. Our deepest condolences go out to Levi's family. Rest in peace, little angel.